From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Good evening and welcome to OpenLine here on News Channel 5 Plus. We've got a great show for you tonight. Incredibly timely given the news over the last week or so. We are talking tonight about social media and the impact on younger generations. We could talk for hours on that, and there's a lot of different ways we can take this conversation. But as always with OpenLine, we want to hear what you think. So keep in mind that number is always on your screen right there, 615-737-7587 spells out the plus. We want to hear your questions. But to help us guide all of this, I want to welcome our guest, Dr. Katie Spirko from Lipscomb University. She's a professor of psychology. Lots to unpack when it comes to social media, Katie, but I just set the stage for us first. I mean, at this point, the genie's out of the bottle. It's not like social media isn't going to be a thing, right?
Certainly. Yeah, I mean, recent studies have shown that on average in the U.S., teenagers are spending about 9 hours per day with entertainment media use, and that's outside of what they're doing for school or completing homework. And so it's certainly something that's becoming ubiquitous in our households and our families.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's been in the headlines over the last week or so. The Facebook whistleblower talking about Facebook and Instagram. A lot of interesting things coming out of the information that she provided to Congress, including the impact when it comes to self-image in Instagram for younger generations. Kind of give people a synopsis of what we found out through that whistleblower.
Yeah, well, and I think we've been interested as psychologists for a while in understanding how social media is impacting particularly the youth, kids and teenagers. And what we're finding is not as simple and clear cut as we'd like it to be. I think we always want simple explanations, but the simple ones are not always the most accurate. And really we have to unpack it and delve into it and look more deeply into how kids are using social media and not just whether or not they're on it or how much we're on it. We want time guidelines and not more than these hours or those hours. But really, it's our kids passively using Instagram to scroll through and engage in peer comparison. Are they looking at pictures of the highlights of everyone else's life and comparing them to how they're feeling about themselves in the moment, versus our kids using social media to connect in a healthy way with their friends or their peers? Are they being monitored appropriately? But what we're finding that in general, there's a lot of peer comparison, and not just with peers really, but then we have the influencers, and teenagers tend to believe what influencers are saying and giving them as reality more than traditional ads. And they're chasing fickle and unattainable standards, and their self-esteem and self-image is certainly taking a hit because of it.
Absolutely. As I probably expected on this is going to be a hot topic for people to call in. We already have somebody on the phone. Rob, you have a question or comment to make. Go ahead, Rob.
Yes, just a question. You know, with all the social media, you've got COVID this, COVID that. If somebody disagrees with what the government says, you know, it's like they're blocked, they're banned from social media. But I'm trying to figure out, why is it that they can block anybody that's got an opposition to what's going on with the COVID, but they don't block the TikTok? These kids are tearing up toilets in schools. You know, it's like they going to, we'll block this, but we won't block that. If you can help me out on understanding that, you know, why don't they block stuff that's bad for kids to watch, is what I'm trying to say. Love y'all, and y'all take care and have a good night.
I think Rob brings up a great point. The social media companies are kind of in a weird spot where, you know, they're trying to, you know, they have a lot of content to police, and definitely begs the question of why certain content is being allowed and certain isn't. Katie?
Certainly. I think that's a great point to raise, and I'm glad it came up early. I think an important factor to consider in this is that the social media platforms are not a free public service that is being offered by the government. It's not something that's being given to help us raise our children and help us keep our families healthy and keep us informed accurately. The social media platforms, their responsibility is really to their shareholders, and disinformation sells, controversy sells. We can't look to social media platforms to police themselves and to raise our kids without oversight and without really deciding what we want in our kids' household. And we can't just assume that it's going to be healthy, because their goal is not really to do what's best for us. Their goal is to sell product and to sell information. And so the way to most effectively sell product and sell information is not what's going to be the most healthy for our kids to be digesting or for us to be digesting.
And I tell you, you saw it on Capitol Hill this past week, a rare moment of bipartisanship that we don't see much on anything anymore. You saw lawmakers from both sides of the aisle really grilling some of these social media giants on how they regulate their pages and if there needs to be more oversight in how that's done.
Certainly, and I think the onus is really on us and our government to set those regulations. We cannot expect the social media platforms to be doing it for themselves. They're going to be operating within the regulations from a profit standpoint, really, as well they should in the private sector. And so we need to take responsibility with our government and with our families to police that ourselves.
Absolutely. Let's bring John into the conversation. John, go ahead with your question or comment. John, you still with us?
Yes, sir. I'm right here, buddy. I'm John.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm John, and I was calling about the social media that y'all were talking about with the younger generation.
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. Yes. I got nephews, and all they do is they just sit around on their phones, and it just doesn't I don't understand it. It's just crazy to me, because back in the days, back around the 80s and things, we didn't have all that, social media and 5G and iPhones and things like that,
Absolutely. It's a different world, isn't it?
I know, it's a crazy thing, man. I just don't understand.
I hear you.
It's crazy to me.
Anything specific you want to ask, or is that just kind of, wanted to throw that out there?
And two, I was wanting to ask about the it was about the data. They said something about that. They said that it was like you do 25 days of off of social media, and they'd give you 25,000 or 2,500 or something like that. And I'm just,
Yeah, I'm not sure if I know what you're referencing. Is that like a promotion you saw somewhere, or what are you specifically referencing, John?
I just seen it on the news. Yeah, I just seen it on the news.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you, John, for the call. Do you know specifically what he's mentioning, Katie?
I'm not sure, but it sounds like maybe there's some money in it for someone to get on social media.
Sure, and he brings up a great point too. That screen time always is a topic of conversation when it comes to social media and how much should parents intervene. So, Katie, I'd love to get your input on that. I think this is a good point to jump into that. If you're a parent, if you're a grandparent, if you're an uncle like John, at what point and what's the line? How often should you intervene in their social media lives, and what should parents and concerned adults be looking out for?
Great question. I think it's important to be monitoring, be aware of what your kids are doing, and it is necessary to set some reasonable expectations and model those expectations in your home. So as a general rule of thumb, make sure that you're following the rules you're setting for your kids. Have dinner time, have family time, have space within your day where the phones are not there, where they're out of sight. There have been numerous research studies that show that kids are distracted and will actually have less empathy in conversation, even just having a smartphone visible, even if it's silenced and turned face down. And so having opportunities to engage in real life in-person conversation without those phones around, I think beyond that, keeping them out of the bedrooms is important. Sleep hygiene is a major issue with kids and adolescents right now. About a fourth of teenagers right now actually meet diagnostic criteria for insomnia. So the screens are certainly being implicated for a number of reasons. We have the light just from the screens themselves will interfere with our melatonin and disrupt our circadian rhythm, our sleep-wake cycle. Then we just have the excitement and the anxiety of those pings and notifications on your phone, the FOMO of not wanting to miss out on something that your friends are posting or doing and wanting to see it right away. If it's there, if it's in the room, if it's accessible, it's going to be a distraction. So you have to do what's right for your family. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that under 18 to 24 months of age, there be no screen time. Kids 2 to 5 should not be having more than an hour a day. But beyond that, there really are not strict guidelines, or they're not consistent guidelines across the board. And in large part, that's because it's a moving target. We don't have a lot of really high quality longitudinal research at this point, because the landscape of social media usage is just changing so quickly that we're relying on a lot of self-report and correlational studies that don't necessarily give us the full picture. And so it's okay to not have all the answers or not be doing exactly the same thing as your mom or dad friends might be doing. You've got to find what's right with your family, but really be focusing on what you want in your family versus what you don't. So a better question to me than how many hours of screen time should my kid get is, what do I want in terms of family interaction on a daily basis? Do I want my kids to be having dinner with me and having conversation? How much physical activity do I think it's important for my kids to have? How many hours of sleep do I think it's important for my kids to have? Set the values around what you want to be in your kids' life, and then just set limitations or boundaries to make sure that the social media and screen time is not infringing on those important values that you want to instill in your kids.
Lots of important information in that answer. Lots of more information to come in this conversation. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this.